remind us that freedom is priceless. It's worth fighting for as long as it takes, and that's how long we're going to be with you, Mr. President, for as long as it takes.
We'll do it.
Thank you.
That's the President of the United States of America meeting with Joe Biden there. Joining me now, Pedro Gonzalez, senior writer of Chronicles, a magazine of American culture. Pedro, it didn't look like it was filmed in East Palestine, Ohio, but I guess it could have been.
Yeah, we could all be mistaken, because from where we are standing, it sure looks like the President of the United States cares more about this obnoxious panhandler, Zelensky, and his kleptocracy than he does about the people in Middle America who are living through a waking nightmare where they don't know if it's even safe to be in their houses. They have no idea what's going on in their own backyard. They don't trust their own government, and who could blame them? And basically there is this long shadow of uncertainty that's been cast over their future. Meanwhile, President Biden is, chumming up with Zelensky. And as part of that visit, by the way, he announced a new $500 million aid package for Ukraine. It's really hard to not get the impression that the people who are running this country hate Americans.
Pedro, you're so good on this stuff. So I've been waiting for you. I was waiting for this today so I could ask you this question because I can't quite process it in my mind. We have this huge disconnect between not just Democrats, it's not just Joe Biden, it's all Republicans. Basically, all the Republicans are in on this too. And I'm not even actually taking a side about the whole Russia-Ukraine thing, but this is not anything that's on any American's top 5 list. Nobody. Everyone has different concerns in this country. Yet it appears to be priority one for both parties. Mitch McConnell, there's nothing more important. Joe Biden, hey, here's another $1 trillion or two. How do we get to a place as a country where neither political party cares about what the people want at all?
I think it's this really noxious confluence of ideology and interests. And what I mean by that, by ideology, is that it's basically this belief that America has a kind of moral obligation to be the world police, but that comes obviously, as we all know now, at the expense of America itself, the real place that's home to flesh and blood people like the ones in East Palestine, Ohio. That is the cost of the American empire, is the republic itself. I mean, this is nothing new. Pat Buchanan wrote a book called Republic, Not an Empire. And the title basically sums up not only this particular view, but something that we've actually known throughout history. Whenever a republic turns into an empire, the republic itself dies. And that's just the reality that we're living in. So why would anybody willingly sign on to that or facilitate that kind of a transition? Well, because obviously there's a lot of money involved. There's a whole lot of money involved in this empire, whether we're talking about defense contractors or the nexus of international money laundering, which is the Ukrainian government, which, until recently, the entire world understood to be extremely corrupt and just kind of a black hole for various shady personalities. It was the Wall Street Journal published an analysis in 2015, and they found that one of the top sources of foreign contributions to the Clinton Foundation was from, surprise, Ukraine. This was all known until recently, but again, the interests of the American empire subordinate that reality, and it all comes at the expense of the real flesh and blood American people.
But if I'm a Senator Jerkwater, and I need to get reelected, I need the people of my state to vote for me. So why do I spend so much time talking about an issue they don't care about at all? Is it simply they're not worried about the American people rejecting them?
I think you're getting at something really important and really difficult, because you're right. We continue to reelect people like Mitch McConnell, who said more than once, I think, that Ukraine is the most important thing going on in the world right now. We continue to reelect people like Lindsey Graham, who after Ukraine and Russia signed a ceasefire, a set of ceasefire agreements called the Minsk Accords. You have Lindsey Graham saying basically that the United States is going to encourage and enable Ukraine to violate this ceasefire 1 year after it's been signed as part of a proxy war against Russia. And yet he gets reelected. And I think there's a real problem here, which is that we don't seem to care enough. And that's why these people stay in power. And on the other hand, they have political machines that are really, really powerful. I mean, Republicans are good at one thing more than anything else, and that's keeping themselves in power with their political machines. Think back to the midterms with the political machine around Kevin McCarthy actually attacking America First candidates like Anthony Sabatini in Florida and Joe Kent. Yes, right, and Washington, right? They're really good at protecting themselves and keeping themselves in office. But again, it comes down to us. I mean, at the end of the day, it's on us to get rid of these guys.
National divorce. That one always gets a bit of pushback whenever I bring it up. And look, everyone knows what I've said about it. I've said it 1,000 times. We shouldn't be living together. We are a couple with nothing in common now, and all we do is throw things at each other and get the cops called on us now. I'm not naive. I don't think it's going to happen, at least not the way I want it, but it's something that's made its way into the national consciousness. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Congresswoman, yesterday, quote, "We need a national divorce," and she goes on to talk about separation between red and blue states. I don't know. I want to hear what Liz Wheeler has to say about it. Maybe she'll yell at me. Joining me now, the great Liz Wheeler of the awesome Liz Wheeler Show, which you can watch right here on the First TV. Liz, I don't want to live around these people. I want a divorce.
I know, when you said that I would yell at you, it actually made me laugh because I was in my head when you were giving the introduction, I was deciding what the most polite way to completely disagree with you was. Because I think a national divorce is a terrible idea for a couple of reasons. Hear me out here. First of all, and I don't want to usurp your role as the host here, but I'm actually interested in your explanation of what a national divorce is. Is this something that entails a civil war? Is this something where we just, where people that are Republican move to red states, people that are liberal move to blue states? What does this actually look like? Because I don't foresee any circumstance, regardless of what it is, that this would work. I mean, do you want bloodshed?
Okay, that is actually a very good point, and I'm glad you brought that up because I realize we do have some new viewers on this one. I want a national divorce specifically because I want to avoid bloodshed at all costs. I don't want anybody to get hurt. I believe we are on a collision course as a nation where people are going to start getting hurt on the regular basis. I don't want that. I don't want the cops called anymore. I think it would be better if we just sat down, and I'm not naive, I know this is not going to happen, but I think it would be better if we just agreed that we hate each other, sit down, and let's divide up the assets and liabilities. Who gets the kids on the weekend? Who gets grandma's china set? Now, I understand it's not going to happen, Liz, but I also argue this, full disclosure, I say it's already happening anyway. We are now, because we are at least two different societies, people are moving. The numbers on people moving already shows you that. People will not live under this, they won't live under that. We're already separating. How eventually that happens in the end, I don't know. But to answer your question in a shorter way, I want a national divorce because I don't want a single drop of bloodshed. That's why I want it.
Okay, so I understand your feeling here. I understand. I think we all feel the same way, right? We see these neo-Marxists, these communists looking at us, trying to coerce us to adhere and celebrate their ideology. They're coming after our children. They're coming after our churches. They're coming after our institutions. And it's horrible. So I totally share your opinion. I don't want to live in a place that these people have access to my family, have access to my religion, have access to my children either. However, what you're describing wouldn't work because it's making an assumption about the ideology of the left that isn't true of the left. And the assumption that would be necessary in order for a national divorce to even work would be assuming that the left wants to live by their values and their morals in their own homes, minding their own business, and that we do the same. Whether this is next door neighbors, whether this is a different city, whether this is a different state, it's almost more of a libertarian mindset that would be required for this to work, this sort of mutual tolerance of differences, this parallel economy. But we know that that's not what the radical leftist ideology is. We know that even in the reddest of states, take Kansas, for example. What's a redder state than Kansas? The radical left could not accept the idea that the people of that state might want to ban abortion after Roe v. Wade was overturned. What the radical left did is they paid a lot of money to export their lies, their propaganda into Kansas to impose their ideology on those people in that state. We know that it's an imperialist ideology, right? They want to break our families apart. They don't want us to respect their pseudo-family structure. They want to come and force us to drop our religion, to close down our businesses, to celebrate their religion, really their ideology, or else use the force and the power of the law in order to coerce us. So I think it wouldn't work because we wouldn't just divide, separate, and call it a day. They still want us. They would never accept that. That's sort of the practicality of the thing. I think there's actually a bigger reason not to do this, though. And the reason is it's a loser mentality. It's a defeatist attitude. The only reason that someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene would even consider a national divorce is if she thinks she can't win. Do you sit here? Do you think that we can't vanquish these communists? Do you think that they are unbeatable? Do you think that we are such losers that we can't figure out how to counter their strategies and their tactics and their infiltration and their indoctrination in a way that actually obliterates that ideology from taking over the United States? I refuse to take part in a loser mentality. I refuse to surrender not only the geography of our nation, but think about California. California is a very blue state, but in the recall election for Gavin Newsom that took place a year or two ago, there were 5 million Californians who voted to recall Newsom. We would be surrendering those people, Republicans, common sense individuals who live, for better or for worse, in blue states who might not have the opportunity to move away. I find that to be so amoral, such an atrocious idea that we would surrender those people, because it's not just vague states, as we are surrendering states because we think we are too loser to defeat the Marxist ideology. I reject it outright.
Okay, counterpoint. One, I don't want a single Republican in California left behind. It should be noted that Jesse Kelly's wonderful national divorce plan involves a grace period so people have time to move and live under the government of their choosing. But two, I want to get to the other part of yours. What you said about them not letting us go, I've heard this argument before, and it's by far the best argument against national divorce. You're not wrong. You're 100% right. These people are ravenous wolves who would come for us in a heartbeat. You're correct in that. But however, you're incorrect about something else. This attitude we have, and I respect it. I've always loved you for being such a fighter. But this attitude we have of, I'm not surrendering a thing, that sounds great. But in real life, let's focus on military campaigns. In real life, that's not how it works. The enemy has troops too. The enemy fights too. The enemy seizes ground too. And sometimes tactical surrender so you can move your troops to a better part so they don't get wiped out is great generalship. We have a country, George Washington gave us this country because that's what he did. He wouldn't fight forever. Nope, not going to fight here. Nope, you can have that. Nope, going to back out here. Tactical retreat it's not surrender, it's not cowardice, it's necessary. And if you don't do it, you're all going to get wiped out. That's what I say.
Well, my counterpoint to that would be, what's the limiting principle on that? I mean, apply that not just to these flowery sounding military rhetoric, which sounds great. I understand the point you're making. That's true in a conventional war, but apply that to the family unit. Are you going to surrender? Are you going to surrender one of your children and say, okay, well, sometimes you have to give up a little bit of the property. You can't have everything. You got to retreat before everyone's wiped out. You would never be willing to sacrifice your wife or one of your children. And that's the same thing. We'd be sacrificing somebody's wife, somebody's husband, somebody's children, because it's not just land. It's not just geography. It's not just boundaries around states. These are real people that we're talking about. So no, I'm not willing to do a tactical surrender. I don't believe that the choice is that defeatist. I don't believe that we have to choose between either tactically surrendering part of our country or losing all of it. I believe that we can win it all. Not every person's heart and mind, but from a legal standpoint, I believe we can eradicate the communist ideology if we identify, acknowledge the reality of it, understand how they're fighting, and then ruthlessly fight back against them. We started doing this in the last couple of years. It's not just some utopian idea of mine.
Okay. I respect that. That's a good argument. Liz Wheeler, The Liz Wheeler Show. Appreciate you, Liz.
I trust the science. I trust the methodology that this state is using. If the EPA
said that your water
said that my air quality was safe, and the state said that the water has been tested and the water quality is safe, then I would trust those readings. I am asking that they trust the government, and that's hard. We know that there is a lack of trust, which is why the state and the federal government have pledged to be very transparent.
Well, just trust the government. Why don't those people trust the government? What's their problem? Joining me now, Mark Morano, climatedepot.com, author of the book, The Great Reset. Mark, I don't know why those people in East Palestine won't just trust the government.
I don't know, when they say, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, why can't we just trust that? Although I must say, Jesse, in this version, it's you'll drink toxic chemicals and you'll be happy. Trust us. There's a million reasons why no one should trust our government. And actually, you shouldn't trust government and corporations, big media. Everyone has proven untrustworthy. And in this specific instance with this Ohio train derailment, they have been essentially lied to from day one. Everything attempted to be minimized, claiming they were doing EPA testing when it was industry-related, funded, tested, talking about this decision that the governors all completely enthusiastically signed off on to implode all of the chemicals into the atmosphere, which they then later say that they weren't given more options. I mean, it has been a disaster, and the last thing anyone should do is trust the government, and the last thing any government official should say is trust the government. But of course, that's the first thing they say when they finally show up on site under pressure.
One thing I find extremely inspiring is that our Secretary of Transportation, he's going to go out there and check things out. Here he was.
Sure.
When are you going to go to East Palestine?
Well, I am planning to go, and our folks were on the ground from the first hours. I do want to stress that the NTSB needs to be able to do its work independently. But when I go, the focus is going to be on action. Look, I was mayor of my hometown for 8 years. We dealt with a lot of disasters, natural and human.
Really? He dealt with disasters, Mark?
As the mayor of South Bend, I don't know what kind of level we're talking about here. South Bend, but here's the thing. He's acting as though they're on top of this. Here's the big picture. The reason there's been no government response is there's no climate change link to this, at least ostensibly no climate change link. I'll get to that in a minute. But just 2 weeks ago, Secretary Pete went on TV and actually said every transportation decision in the 21st century is a climate decision. Direct quote, Jesse. So when that happens, he probably got a call, train derailment, toxic hazard chemicals, vinyl chloride, same thing they use in, in essentially war weapons, weaponized gas. And his answer was, is there any climate angle? No, well, I can't be bothered because every decision is a climate decision. And that's essentially what happened. Climate change has literally hijacked the environmental agenda, the transportation and our infrastructure agenda. If it can't be turned into a happy press release about EV buses or some kind of transportation, a futuristic train that's electric, they're not interested. And that's where we are right now. So when he says, we were on this, that's a lie. They weren't on it because these are poor white Trump voters, not equity decisions, and this is not happening in Beverly Hills or Georgetown in Washington or the Hamptons or somewhere where they have a huge wealthy constituency to push them. These are people that didn't matter to this administration, and that's why they have been left to flounder.
And then I talked to kids about the isolation they experienced in COVID, the disruption for the first time in modern history of this country. We all went to school. So in kindergarten, you go to school. These kids' lives have been disrupted. They didn't get the education that they needed. They didn't see their friends. They didn't play ball. They didn't do theater. Okay? And on top of that, they're sitting worrying about whether the planet is going to be here for them when they are older because of climate change. So they got all of these things on their minds.
Joining me now, my buddy Corey DeAngelis, Senior Fellow, American Federation of Children. Corey's actually out there making things happen at the state level for education. All right, Corey, boy, I had no idea Bernie was so anti-lockdown. That's inspiring. I guess I don't remember it that way, but clearly I've just been hitting the head too much.
I mean, look, we're seeing this from the left all over the place. They're just gaslighting on the issue. He's at a teachers union conference with the NEA and the American Federation of Teachers, the two largest national teachers unions. And it's like, dude, read the room. The people that are sitting there, they were the ones that lobbied to keep the schools closed as long as possible. You had the AFT and the NEA explicitly lobby the CDC to make it more difficult to reopen the schools in person. And these unions held children's education hostage to secure multi-billion-dollar ransom payments from the taxpayer. and it worked for them. They received over $190 billion in so-called COVID relief since March of 2020. But look, parents aren't dumb. They saw what happened over the past few years, and no amount of gaslighting is going to work on these parents who just want more of a say in their kids' education. And thankfully, the unions overplayed their hand, awakened a sleeping giant, and we're seeing a school choice revolution all across the country right now.
Gosh, we are, and I love it. You know what? We'll get to that in a moment. I want to backtrack a little bit, Corey. I like to go in order because I'm dumb and I can't keep my thoughts in order. America's education system wasn't necessarily working the way it should have before COVID. Obviously, you and I are going to talk about COVID and the lockdowns and the insanity. But prior to COVID, it wasn't churning out a bunch of kids who couldn't read and write and do math and things like that, was it?
No, you look at the nation's report cards, they've been flat for several decades, even though we poured 152% more resources into the government school system per student after adjusting for inflation since 1970. Have outcomes gotten 152% better since 1970? Absolutely not. They've been flatter, in some cases worse. Things haven't gotten any better. It's just during COVID, it just became so obvious. I mean, it's one thing for the school system to fail your kids each and every year academically, and then we keep throwing more money at the problem, expecting different results, the definition of insanity. But then the schools weren't even open for business, and they were still getting your $16,000 or so per student. And in fact, it was worse than that. They were able to keep their doors closed and say, we're failing because we don't have enough money. Give us, $4,000 or $5,000 more per student in the COVID relief. And they still kept their doors closed. In Chicago, 2 weeks to slow the spread turned into 2 years to flatten a generation of kids. They were striking in 2022. They were tweeting that it was racist and sexist to reopen the schools. They thankfully deleted that tweet, but it was just nonstop hypocrisy and nonstop just doing whatever they could, theatrics, to keep the schools closed and not go back to work. It became obvious to so many people that this is a bunch of BS. And in fact, the parents also got to see that their kids were being indoctrinated in ways that weren't aligned with their values. And so the problem became elevated over the past few years. It wasn't just failing in math and reading. It was failing in math and reading. And now we're also seeing brainwashing happening in the schools, and parents, that really mobilized them to say, hell no, I'm going to change things. I'm going to push back at the school board meeting. I'm also going to push back at the ballot box, hold politicians accountable, and push for school choice.
One of the things I like and dislike about this current world we have is there are a lot of dudes in this society. I'm sure women too, but I'm not going to speak for women right now. There are a lot of dudes in our society who grew up without a good father or a good male influence in their lives. And when you get older, and you need that direction, you need help. So I don't like that part, but here's one part I do like. I do like that there are people out there, readily available people out there that are offering these lessons men need, lessons a lot of men didn't get through no fault of their own, lessons that are gonna help us all be a little bit better. One of the best accounts out there, if you're on social media, on Twitter, and I'd highly recommend his Substack for this kind of stuff, not politics, just more life stuff, is Ed Latimore, former heavyweight boxer who will punch your head off your shoulders. And you can also find him at edlatimore.substack.com. Ed, first of all, who are you and where'd you come from?
Man, so I'm Ed Latimore. You hear me loud and clear?
Got you loud and clear.
Just making sure. I'm Ed Latimore, man, and I came from another human just like the rest of us, and I was born in Pittsburgh, PA, grew up there. Typical kind of at-risk youth, childhood, single mom, public housing, all the whole nine. And I faced a lot of those issues that you were talking about. And you figured things out through a lot of hard work, a lot of events, putting myself into these difficult positions, because I think one of the things that you don't get when you don't have a masculine influence around or in the house or anything positive really like that, of a masculine nature, you don't realize the necessity of pushing yourself and getting uncomfortable and really seeing what you're made of, but not in a way where it's like, I see a lot of the stuff that's online today where it talks about this idea of getting out of your comfort zone, being pushed to you uncomfortable, but it's like, nah, it's one thing to do it consciously. You're not going to push hard. It's a totally different story when you're when you're in the ring or when you're in the street or you're figuring out how to feed yourself, that kind of stuff. So I picked all that up, and I really think I've turned into a certainly someone that is, you could do worse in terms of people to listen to. I think I have a lot of good things to say. At the very least, what I try to do is live a good life for myself and everyone else. If they follow that example, I think they'll turn out pretty well.
Yeah, no, you're one of the better ones for that kind of stuff. Ed, you talk about making yourself uncomfortable a lot, especially as a man. Explain that to me. Why should I want that, Ed? I don't want to be uncomfortable. As soon as I'm done and I take this earpiece out of my ear, I want to throw on some sweats and I want to sit down with the pizza and I want to put my feet up on the couch. I don't want to be uncomfortable. Why do you want me to be uncomfortable?
So that's not. First of all, there's nothing wrong with feeling that way. That's how we're designed. The way I learned to say it, the most general way in physics, is that all organisms seek the most energy efficient configuration, i.e., we try to get as most for as little as we can put out. But there's no, if you only do that, there's only so much you can get. You'll get just enough to survive, and that's pretty much it. And yeah, look, survival is easy, and it's gotten even easier. Like, there's a lot of people alive today who are only here, because fresh drinking water is never more than 15 minutes away. It's not a very hard life, but you need to be exposed to these difficulties. You need to break out of that homeostatic kind of comfort zone to become more capable and more efficient. Because look, life will get harder. That's one thing that is like very clear, that whatever you're doing at 20 or however you're living, it's harder than it was to do at 15. You don't really know. But then when you turn 25, you look and see, oh man, some of these cats I went to school with, they're all good, they got money, they're living, but not everybody. And so you can kind of ignore that. But by 30, it's like, ooh, we're bad. And by 35, it's nuts. And after that, you just kind of disappear, and you're stuck in your ways. Unless you shake yourself out of that comfort. And that means you have to do things by definition that are difficult, because it's not in that zone of energy efficiency. Like something basic that everyone uses as an example, but it's very true and illustrates the point well. Going to the gym and building your body up. It really is awesome to just sit around and I don't think it's awesome anymore. It makes me sick to think about it. But at some point, a lot of us think it's awesome, or thinks it's awesome, or thought it was awesome to chill out, watch Netflix all day and eat junk food and drink soda or beer or whatever your poison is. But okay, but you're going to get older. Your body is going to degrade. It's going to start breaking down against time, against gravity, just against the forces of life. And if you don't build that up, right, you'll end up spending your last years, which will be shorter, by the way. You won't have as many. You end up spending them sick. It's the same if you don't work and develop a skill. It's very easy to just be stupid. Very easy. Being stupid doesn't really pay well. So you probably should not be as stupid as you can be, unless you're like a great athlete, and even then you might do something dumb. But that's your scenario too. You still have to work very hard. There's no way around this if you want to have anything that resembles a nice time on this planet. And you only got 70, 80 years. Hopefully they're nice. They're a good time. You're not suffering.